Hello. My name is Mobina Hashmi, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Television, Radio, and Emerging Media at Brooklyn College. I've been here since 2006, which makes this about 16 years. In addition to teaching, I'm also active in our union, and I do rescue work with cats. So I was born in Pakistan, in Karachi, in the early 1970s. And my family on both sides is settled in Karachi, but we moved to Islamabad, which is the capital of the country, in 1980. Growing up in Pakistan, the name literally means in Urdu, land of the pure. A huge part of my growing up was the fact that we had a military dictatorship that took power in the late 1970s by deposing Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who's the elected prime minister. They tried him, and then he was executed by hanging. So more than 10 years, we had General Zia-ul-Haq as the dictator. So I grew up in a space where there were no elections. What was handed down were policies about what's going to happen. So for a while there, we decided we were going to be super Islamic. Then we realized that, that doesn't work with the rest of the world. If you grow up in a place like Pakistan, you have to be aware of what's going on in the world, because our economy was shaped by the World Bank, by the International Monetary Fund, by what kind of aid was coming in from the USA to help us be proxy fighters in Afghanistan. So we were very aware of those international dynamics, given the state of the education system, and that my family is middle class. So we have a lot of cultural capital. We knew that sort of education was the way to go. My grandparents had all been part of the colonial government in India, in one way or the other, as bureaucrats or in the military. Almost all of my uncles and aunts and my father studied abroad. When my generation grew up, there was sort of the understanding is that for higher education, we would go somewhere else, the United Kingdom or the USA, or just somewhere else, because that's where you get the better education. And you need that education if you're going to have any chances. I think the biggest expectation on everyone in my generation was to be a quote unquote good child. Between the age of 7 and 12, I was reading every single thing I could lay my hands on. I got a bridged version of a Charles Dickens novel for I think my 7th or 8th birthday that I still have somewhere, and I read it. We had an illustrated dictionary. I read that. My dad had some computer magazines. I read those. My mother had women's magazines that had information about all kinds of women's private health things that I had no idea what they were about, but I read them. So that's primarily what I was doing. And my identity there and later was as a really good student. The expectations were always in relation to my brother. He was not good at school, and he was quote unquote naughty. He would get into trouble. He broke things. He spoke back. All those kinds of things. So it was also like this thing where it was always why can't you be more like your sister? Which made it difficult for me to be me, because it was a way of scolding my brother. And he was good at things. He was not a bad at all. He was good at art, interested in that, but that's not what a boy does. So he should have been good at math, at physics, at those kinds of things, because that's where you get a job. Your role in the world as a boy is to take care of your parents. You want to be successful, because if you're not successful, then when somebody asks your father or mother, how are you? How are your children doing? You won't be able to say, oh, my son is blah, blah, blah. If you are the daughter, you take care of your husband's parents. If you are not married, then you are available in theory to help your parents or be with your parents, take care of your parents, no matter what else is going on in your life, because, you don't have any other commitments. So that was a long process of negotiating with my parents that that's not happening. None of those things are happening. I wanted to make robots. I was interested in artificial intelligence and robotics, and that's what I wanted to do. So that was always kind of the plan. I also really wanted to get out of my home. Is that I did not like my family dynamics. I did not feel comfortable there. I just wanted to get out. I wanted to go and study abroad. So I applied to a number of places. I actually didn't get into anywhere of my top choices, but I got into Dartmouth College. Ironically, I could not have afforded to go to Brooklyn College, but I could afford to go to Dartmouth because Dartmouth is filthy rich and they have what is called a need-blind admissions policy. So I got a massive financial aid package where my parents paid I think $6,000 over 4 years for my education. And at Brooklyn College, that would not have happened because I'm not a US citizen. I was not eligible for any of the funding that you get here. And then I went and took a film class and I fell in love with film. And that was where I got derailed. And then I took another class. I had a friend who was really into psychoanalysis and postmodern theory and critical theory. And so through him, I got interested in this stuff and took some classes on that, all of which added up to me wanting to explore this more and wanting to go to graduate school. When I went to grad school, a part of the funding came from being a TA, a teaching assistant. My mother is a teacher. My older cousin, who I admire and love a lot, was a teacher. I had some amazing teachers in school, in college, right? So that was always something that felt like a possible path. They were the only people I saw who were dorky and got interested, the same kind of thing that I was excited by. So it was like, clearly, if I want to continue being able to talk about and learn about the things that I find interesting, I'm going to have to stick around these teacher types. And so, from day one in grad school, I was teaching. If you do your PhD, the assumption is that really the only job you're qualified for is teaching. And you're not even qualified for teaching because nobody actually teaches you how to teach. Along the way, I got interested in union work. And I got interested in thinking about workers, right, and labor, and how much of our value as a human being in this society is tied up with the work that we do and how much our work is valued. Going back to seeing how my brother's worth was judged by how good he was at something that would enable him to become a quote-unquote successful worker later. Seeing the difference in the lives of my family members, where some were very well off and some were completely not well off. Then going to graduate school, and the main thing we do in cultural studies is sort of try to understand the cultural aspects of how power is exercised in society. I applied for a number of jobs, and I did get 2 interviews in New York City. And I chose Brooklyn College because it was part of the City University of New York. And part of that was realizing that Brooklyn College and CUNY are public institutions. Realizing how dependent we were as an institution on what people in government and people in lobby groups and in rich businesses and things like that, how much value they placed on public education. Did they care about public education? Do they think the tax dollar should go towards this? And I saw what that meant for my students in my class. I had some amazing colleagues who I was lucky to meet early on who helped me see our students in a different way. So for example, the student in my 11 a.m. class who came a little bit late and was kind of falling asleep was not a slacker or uncaring. They were coming from a night shift. The student who didn't turn in their homework or did really uneven work. Could be maybe they're not interested in it, but it could also be because they literally have 3 hours a week in which to do their homework. There are resources. There are definitely resources. We have a writing center, there's a career advisement center, there's even like financial resources. All of those things are there. They're not always easily available. There are hoops to jump through. So for example, there's something I've been railing against for years now, and maybe there's a good reason for it, but there is an emergency grant that students can get if, for example, somebody loses their job or is about to get evicted or something. You can get an emergency grant from the college that will help you pay your rent. That's amazing, right? However, you have to be a student in good standing. And what being in good standing has to do with the fact that you need to pay rent escapes me. Our financial aid system, now they're changing, thank God, finally this year after much lobbying, but TAP, right, Tuition Assistance Program, you had to take 12 credits a semester. I had students who would come and apologize to me, and some would even cry, where they were saying they had to drop my class because they just couldn't handle 4 courses, and they felt like failures. Nobody recognizes that they are making a very difficult choice. And the fact that I had colleagues who were in offices that had leaks, that had mold, mildew, broken furniture. So where it all comes together is realizing that in terms of labor, it's clear that the intellect and abilities of people in public higher education are not recognized and are not valued in the same way as the intellect and the labor of people in more elite institutions. The union work is part of changing that dynamic, justifying breaking, away from my family, not literally, but kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to do my thing, even if it's not what they would like. Whatever I do, it's what I need to do. It's what I want to do. I wouldn't be doing anything else. So it's not that there's something else that I would rather be doing that I'm giving up in order to do this. This is what I want to do.